Episode 18 opens onto the Belladonna assassination fight. God damn it. In the original version, the only good section of this fight was Blake versus Ilia and the gunchuck moment, which was honestly too short for its own good. Okay, so we open on Fennec and Corsic preparing themselves for the fight, doing some ritualistic chanting to themselves to get in that Zen mindset to take a life, and also sending up a prayer to that fox figure on the wall. It won't really be touched upon, but this guy on the wall is one of the originators of fauna superiority ideology, revered somewhat like a messiah or a past papal figure to the extremist faunus. With their preparations complete, they head out the door, the smoke of their incense becoming the focus of the foreground. We fade in from that to wafts of steam coming off a cup of tea in the Belladonna household, where Gira and Saber are having a pleasant discussion over the protective details of Gira's upcoming speech. Just as they're winding down for the conversation to more casual fare, the lights cut out, leaving them both confused. Saber stands and checks the window, noting the Belladonna house is the only one without power. He and Gira become alarmed by this, only to be interrupted when one of the guards outside is thrown through the door with a blade sticking out of his chest. Callie and the cat guard come out of a different room, confused by the ruckus, only to be told to go back to where they came from to find a place to hide. The Albions rush into the room, followed closely by Yuma. The Bat Faunus glides over Gira and Saber, slipping into the door behind Callie and the guard. Gira turns to chase them, but is thrown to the side by a dust-based attack launched by Corsic. He tuts at Gira and Saber, lining up beside his brother and a small handful of other White Fang that came to the door behind them. Fennec very politely asks Gira to make this easy for them. Gira and Saber share a quick glance before charging forward to create a fray. We cut to Callie and the guard, who are fleeing through the home from Yuma. He casually tosses a grenade over his shoulder at the door, and it explodes into a solid wall of ice that keeps it shut. He just taunts that no one is coming for you ladies before drawing his pistols and opening fire on the two as they pass into the circular tea room. Callie's guard flips a table and quickly returns fire. Yuma retreats behind a pillar, and the two begin a short firefight, during which both get a number of hits in. Unfortunately, the cat girl's aura gives out first. She screams after the last shot connects and collapses, still conscious but too injured to fight. Yuma begins to stalk forward, only for Callie to pick up the gun and fire back. Her shots go wide, but there are enough to spook Yuma, at least for the 3 shots she gets off before the magazine goes dry. Callie curses and dives back behind the table. Yuma again stalks towards their cover. Thinking quickly, Callie grabs a tipped tea tray, and the cat girl looks at her with confusion and disbelief. Callie gives a look that conveys, well, what have we got to lose? So when Yuma rounds the corner, he's hit squarely in the face with the sheet, breaking his aura and knocking him out cold. Callie and the guard look from the tray to the unconscious Yuma and share a "I can't believe that worked" moment before we cut away. Back with Gira and Saber, they're holding on surprisingly well with the White Fang. Gira has grabbed the table in the room and is using it as a shield so Saber can get up close and cut down mooks with his sword. When the table inevitably breaks, Gira grabs one of the 2 remaining mooks and tosses him at Fennec, only for Fennec to dodge to the side and allow the mook to end up hitting the other remaining White Fang stooge, sending them both into the wall behind him, collapsed. Fennec runs forward at him, but is stopped by Saber, engaging in a brief duel that is interrupted when both Gira and Corsic try to back up their allies. The 4 begin to circle, looking for an opening, and Gira openly questions the brothers' approach. They're both so careful with their words, so calm and calculated. A frontal assault doesn't fit their kind of strategy. Flippantly, they acknowledge the idiosyncrasy, that it is in fact very unlike them to do something like this, isn't it? It's almost as if someone more youthful and bold had decided to carry out the hit instead. Of course, the Albions will publicly decry Gira's death, and they'll make sure the true troublemakers will be brought to justice in his wake. The rogue faction within the chapter would be expunged immediately for their heinous crimes, and the Albions would go on a long-winded apology tour for not having kept a tighter leash on their subordinates. While everyone is talking, they're actually secretly charging their weapons behind their backs or under their cloaks. Gira whispers Ilia's name, and the brothers smile, unleashing a flaming whirlwind at Gira and Saber. The duo are thrown back into the wall, and the windows shatter when they make contact. Saber is about to recover, leaning on his sword to stand, when Corsic remarks that they're tired of his obstinate loyalty. With a flick, he sends one of his knives at Corsic, piercing through his aura and stabbing him through the chest. Gira sees this and screams, tearing off his shirt and charging at the two. Outside, Blake and Sun arrive at the back door of the house and are quick to burst into the expansion Blake mentioned back in episode 4. Unbeknownst to them, Ilia is watching them from atop the house and sneaks in through a window that leads to the second floor. When Blake and Sun enter, she openly confronts Blake, prompting Blake to send Sun ahead to help her mom and dad. Sun questions if that's wise, but Blake assures him that she can handle this. He leaves, and we get the last ideological spar before Ilia and Blake come to blows. Blake wonders aloud why Ilia isn't already inside helping out the Albions, to which Ilia says she needed to prepare herself. Despite what it must seem, she genuinely doesn't want to do this. Blake questions why she's even still there, and Ilia lashes back that she doesn't have a choice in the matter. It's the only thing that works. Blake shouts that she's made more allies through kindness than violence, to the point that she considers a Schnee of all people one of her closest friends. There are better ways. Ilia refuses to respond, and Blake asks her to stay out of her way before trying to leave. Instead, Ilia drops down and attacks, and we get the original Ilia and Blake fight, though the lights are already off at the beginning. You know, the power was cut. When Ilia goes all stealthy, she'll simply blend in with the floorboards and wall panels, since Blake can see in the dark. But yeah, other than that, this is untouched, dialogue and all. In fact, aside from a few blocking issues, the rest of this fight is pretty good as well, ignoring the direct ripoff of My Hero Academia, of course. The only major change we're throwing in there is some of the combat dialogue where Gira tries to warn Ilia she's being framed. This of course will confuse her, as well as Blake and Sun, and lead to Fennec and Corsic deriding her for even listening to our heroes like their words actually mean anything. Blake helps draw the line of how the White Fang will hurt anyone to get what they want, will help push Ilia towards turning her back on Corsic and Fennec. The rest of the scene plays out as normal. Fennec dies, Albion is knocked out by Ilia, and Ilia has a crippling breakdown. Outside the Belladonna Manor, we don't get any grandiose speeches. Instead, we get a quiet scene of reflection, watching as the rescue services begin to swarm the house, as well as guards and onlookers. Gira carries out Saber's body and lays it out reverently on the ground, while Blake and Sun lead Ilia, Corsic, and a few surviving White Fang members out in handcuffs, where other members of the guard are there to meet them. Ilia turns to Blake and apologizes, genuinely. She looks at the cuffs at her wrist and groans wryly that she's really screwed herself over. Blake says that it was close, but ultimately there's a lot Ilia can still walk back from. She just needs to give it time and really reflect on what she's done the last few years. Both of them look up at the burning building, and the flames fading into the night round out the episode. Important to have home insurance against domestic terrorists, am I right, people, or am I right? I mean, I can't really afford it, but maybe one day I will be able to thanks to all the wonderful patrons supporting me. I'd like to welcome new patrons Annabelle Ortiz, Fates Awakener, Will G1090, and Alex Roth to the bonfire, and I hope to see you guys in the Tundra Discord. Let's follow that with a big thanks to all of my current patrons as well, because without them, I couldn't do rewrites like this. Remember, for $1 or more to my Patreon, and you can get access to the Team Frostbite Discord server, the Tundra, where I regularly interact with my fans. If you feel like supporting the channel, I hope you consider throwing $1 my way, and I hope to see you there. Now, back to the show! Our episode 19 begins like the original episode 10, with John and Ruby arriving in Kuroyuri, wondering aloud if any of the buildings look like they have a pharmacy or clinic in them. They also touch on Ren's refusal to come to town, though it's clear to both of them why he wouldn't without it being said. The flashback with Ren and his mother is basically untouched until Nora comes into the picture, and even then it's just small dialogue tweaks. When the bullies ask where Nora came from, one of the kids mentions she must be one of those Fiskers from the north, helping us slot in a little bit of lore as background detail. They compare her to an abandoned dog with rabies, saying she's absolutely worthless since no one cares about her. And wow, you know, I did not expect to be putting this much child abuse in this season, but here I am with 3 instances of kids getting the short end of the stick. I wonder what this says about me as a person. Best maybe not to read too much into that. Ren sees all of this and is too scared to intervene, opting to run off after Nora and the bullies see him. He runs right into Hanzo, and yes, I'm going to keep calling him that because it's easier than saying Ren's dad all the time, and the audio commentary made it at least clear someone on the team knew what they were doing with this design. Anyway, Hanzo scares everyone else off and asks Ren if he too wishes to run. Ren is still too scared to do or say anything, and Hanzo gives him the important life lesson about action versus inaction, and sends Ren home to his mother while he goes to talk to the mayor about some bandit sightings nearby. We cut back to Ruby and John in the present, unable to find supplies or even a sturdy building they can hole up inside to wait for help. They hear the Nuckelavee in the distance, which sets them on edge, if not for themselves, then for Nora and Ren's safety. With Crow leaning against the courtyard tree, Ruby begins to regret dragging John and the rest into this mess, since they didn't know about, well, the scope of what they were dealing with. John rattles off how much they've lost together. Pyrrha, Penny, their futures. and how RWBY has lost even more beyond that and is still pushing forward, looking to bring justice to the people that destroyed Beacon. She didn't drag them along, she gave them the courage to follow. When they were just as lost, she chose a direction when no one else would, and they fell in behind her because it was the only thing that could bring them out of the dark hole the world had made for them. So what if things had gotten more complicated? She made a choice, and so had they. Now all that's left to do is see those choices through to the very end. They stare back at each other with smiles as we use the tree silhouette to transition into another flashback with Ren. Ren is woken up by his mother, and Hanzo, yes, his name is Lee, I'm sticking with Hanzo, comes in telling them they need to flee. His mother suggests the safe house, and instead of suggesting they get a huntsman, Hanzo says the other huntsmen are struggling and it may be better to flee the village. This helps imply, at least to some extent, Hanzo here is in fact a huntsman, which will give him a reason to stay a scene or two from now and help the threat against the Nuckelavee. It also nips that little issue of why don't any of these settlements have huntsmen in the bud once and for all. Anyway, as Ren's mom is reassuring him, the Nuck bursts through the roof and kills her in what is probably one of my favorite scenes in the entire series. Seriously, kudos for that level of diegetic subversion. Caught me off guard during that first watch through 3 years ago? Oh god, I've been doing this for almost 4 years. What even is my life? Anyway, when the screen cuts black, Ren is being carried by Hanzo through the streets while people are panicking and being picked off by smaller Grimm. While not the main threat, it at least establishes that more Grimm have shown up in the wake of the Nuckelavee, or at the behest of something else. When Hanzo trips, it's apparent he's too wounded to carry Ren to safety, and begs him to be brave and escape on his own. He hands off his knife, Ren cries, and when the Nuck finally appears, Hanzo screams for him to run and distracts it with his arrows. Ren runs off and hides under a bridge. He sees Nora under one of the houses, accidentally unlocks his semblance while hyperventilating, and goes to comfort her as the Nevermores begin to sweep in for cleanup duty. They hold each other, meet officially, he gives her her tiny hammer, which I only just this watch through realized they set up earlier with the merchant stall, so kudos for the foresight there, and they wait for night to pass, when all the Grimm have dispersed. When the morning sun shines, the two hold hands together and make their way out of town. As they leave through one of the arches, from the foreground of the forest, we see a long burgundy boot stomp down into the mud, obscuring the camera. We use the curved walls of the settlement to transition over to the mountains Ren and Nora are climbing. This is completely untouched, not even small dialogue changes need to be made like I usually have to. They get up the mountain, find Shion's flag, Hanzo's arrows, and what seems to be the Nuck's lair where it sheds all the weapons that get trapped in it, and they stare out morosely as the Nuck stalks through the trees towards Kuroyuri. The camera leaves us on them holding hands in distress, and over the blackness we hear the Nuck scream. We open episode 20 staring at the sun before tilting the camera down to see the Xiaolong household, where Yang is finishing up painting her mechanical arm yellow. Nearby, we can see Neo pulling Roman's hat out of the bag, frowning before placing it on her head. She focuses for a minute, and the traditional pink wave returns to her head, as well as her heterochromia. With a relieved breath, she lets the illusion drop, smiling as she returns to looking like Jane Doe. We cut to the shed, where Neptune is actually beside Bumblebee with a wrench as Yang approaches. Neptune compliments Yang on what a fine machine she has. A few months of disuse and she's barely collected dust. Yang accepts the compliment and offers him a mechanical arm, helping him to his feet. He thanks her for letting him toy around with it and says that it should be getting a little bit better mileage, but he doesn't want her to quote him on it. He says he's going to miss having her around, but he guesses it wouldn't have lasted very long anyway. He's got tickets to Argus next week. He even ribs her, saying that when Haven starts back up in the fall and the remains of season make it down to Mistral to attend, they should link up and get something to eat. Yang agrees, and he walks his way out the door, passing Neo, who he still calls Jane, in the process. He says farewell to her as well, though much more truncated because they didn't really interact as much, and departs. Neo and Yang approach the bike and look at it together, and this is where Tai gives us the "you know, I never said you were ready" line, though tacked on isn't either of you statement for Neo. Yang playfully goads him to stop her, and he turns her down, saying he's still sore from the last spar that she's done with him, complimenting how much control she's gotten with that arm. He just wanted to say goodbye without it being a letter like her sister. He finally gets down to business and he asks what exactly her plan is. Yang says she's chasing after her, leaving it vague as to who she's talking about. Tai says, "Well, in that case, I think a map might be handy," holding out a map for Neo to take. Neo takes a hold of it, and he holds it a little bit longer before giving it up. He looks Neo in the eyes, then to Yang, then back to Neo before making them promise to take care of each other. The two share a look and nod. He looks Yang in the eyes and says that he trusts her, he really does, and goes in for a solid hug. He He says he'd tell them to be careful, but he knows that's not going to happen. He knocks her robotic arm gently and says to at least come back in one piece this time. She gives him a gentle punch back with a snicker. We cut to see Bumblebee speeding off into the distance, Ty watching them go. He seems happy but frowns, lifting a scroll to look at what seems to be a police file containing grainy images of Neapolitan and her association with Roman Torchwick. Ty sighs and just mumbles, "I hope you know what you're doing." With Weiss, we get her daring escape with Klein, though we change things up when she passes her father's study. Instead of Klein being called away, the two pass her father's door and she catches an argument between Jock and Ironwood over the border closing. We get all the little details, how Jock claims Winter was stolen by the military, how James is relying on her information to make this decision, the movement of supplies and weapons inside Mistral, Ironwood's trust issues, all that good junk. During this, Weiss stops to actively listen and waves Klein to go forward just in case she gets caught. Worried but dutifully, Klein complies and tells her to meet him at the first floor library. When Ironwood declares that it's no one in or out without the Round Table's permission, Jock corrects that it's without Ironwood's permission. To that, Ironwood begins to leave the room, saying that he'd think that Jock would want to be on his side. Weiss backs off and actually summons a glyph to shut the door, but James is too quick to open it, stepping partway into the hallway. He and Weiss meet eyes, both freezing for a millisecond. He looks from Weiss to the bags, to her shocked face, and then offers a soft smile, tacit approval for whatever defiance she's acting out on. Further, he actually stays in the doorway and turns to Jacques, commenting how unfortunate it must be for Jacques, having all that money and no power to back it up. This throws both of them into a more heated argument, giving him time to wave Weiss away behind his back. She gets the hint, sneaking down the rest of the hallway. In the library, Klein pops out of the hidden passage and invites her in. They hug, he asks if Mistral is safe, she confirms it's where she'll find her sister, yada yada yada. They share a moment before Klein is called for by Jacques, and Klein urges Weiss through the passage. They say a last goodbye and Weiss passes on one last thank you to him before he shuts the door. We transition to Menagerie where a jail door has just been closed as Blake visits Ilia in lockup. Corsic is ranting and raving at Ilia that she's a traitor from a different cell. Ilia appears pensive over the whole ordeal and grips the bars tightly. She apologizes for trying to hurt Blake and her family. She's very uncomfortable to admit that Blake may have a point. The White Fang is losing sight of what it was doing if its members are so willing to turn on each other. She feels a touch of shame it took her a personal betrayal to feel it click for her. She likes to think she's more self-aware than that. Blake says she wasn't completely wrong. The White Fang are wrong, but Blake admits that she did run from the Fang, from Vale, from her friends. It didn't make sense, but she worked it through with her friends and family, and she's ready to face everything that scared her. And with a little effort, Ilia can overcome her problems too, especially with a friend at her side. Ilia goes cross, saying very firmly the White Fang aren't wrong. What's happening now? That's not the White Fang she signed up for, but she's still signed on to fight for the Faunus against the humans. If the fear tactics were working, she'd keep using them, because evidently things like peace talks don't get results. Blake sighs, lamenting being on the other side of the argument, that she just wishes that Ilia could see what she has, that even someone as obstinate as Weiss Schnee could have her eyes opened and become a friend. Ilia rests her head against the bars and muses that Blake was always surprisingly optimistic as a person. Blake shakes her head and tries to explain that, while it was peaceful, what it took to open people's eyes wasn't just sitting down and talking. There was yelling, there was fighting. They struggled to understand each other, and in the end not everyone agreed, but enough did, and Blake felt safe. And she wants that for Ilia too, because despite everything, she still considers Ilia a friend, just one that needs a wake-up call. Ilia smiles, but it soon droops. She closes her eyes and presses her forehead deeper into the bars, lamenting that Blake doesn't see her the same way. Blake says Ilia was a trusted friend, and she'd like Ilia to be a trusted friend again, but no, she can't reciprocate. She's not really in a position to be in a relationship with anyone, and besides Blake trails off, conflicted on what to say. Ilia immediately assumes, is there someone else? She pauses and goes a little flat, is it Sun? Blake refutes that. Sun's dear to her, but any romantic attraction she felt towards him was fleeting. But she does trust him, and she hopes that she can trust Ilia the same way by the end of things. She reaches out for Ilia to hold her hand. Ilia hesitates before taking it, and the two share a nice quiet moment together, before Corsic's reinvigorated ranting interrupts them. Ilia turns more serious and tells Blake there's more. She was only the first messenger to deliver a video recording from Adam. She tells Blake to search the Menagerie White Fang headquarters. She knows Adam has a plan, but she has no idea what it is, and it most certainly isn't good for anyone. Blake thanks her and says goodbye, promising to stop by again soon. She walks out of the room, and a tracking shot transitions us from walking out of the lockup to Nora and Ren running into Kuroyuri. The two find John, RWBY, and Crow just as Ren has started falling into a small mental breakdown. As RWBY and John express confusion, Ren falls into a depressive spiral, muttering, "No, no, 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 no," over and over and over again. When RWBY asks what the issue is, Nora lifts her finger and points to a creature rounding out from behind a distant building. We get scattered images of different parts of the Nuck before finding its screaming, melting mouth, ending the episode. Okay folks, say it with me now. Episodes 21 and 22 are combined into one big episode. I'm pretty sure at this point it's so regular people can recite it in their heads. Crap, am I becoming predictable? Quick, bring in the clowns! Okay, but on a more serious note, we open with the Nuck attack on Kuroyuri, where Ranger are being thrown back after what we can assume is an initial assault by it. We get the nice long reveal shot for this absolutely grotesque design before we start to hop back into things. For a second, we actually get to see what vision is like for a Grimm as we see through the Nuck's eyes. Everything is in white scale, with outlines that occasionally blur together, making it difficult to see things unless the Grimm's head is moving or the object is moving itself. The exceptions are the people, who are very clearly surrounded in a miasma of black mist that outlines them clearly to the creature's vision. It scans over the group before settling in on the biggest cloud of darkness, Crow. Seeing it look towards her uncle, RWBY is the one that speeds forward to push him out of the way as the Nuck lashes forward with a noodle arm and punches right through the tree where Crow was resting. Not used to carrying the weight of a full-grown man, RWBY stumbles at the end of her dash and has to readjust, giving the Nuck time to charge. Ren drops to the ground and we see a semblance spread out, grayscaling the ground, RWBY, and Crow. From the Nuck's point of view, we see the miasma dissipate completely. It stops, confused, just as a salvo of grenades from Nora slam into its side. It runs off, and RWBY continues speeding Crow off to safety. When she drops him off at an abandoned house, he grabs her arm only to pass out before saying anything. RWBY rushes back to the fight, where Nora, Ren, and John are circling the Nuck. When RWBY rushes right for it, she's knocked out of the sky, which prompts John to yell at her to circle strafe. The four continue circling it, taking swipes and pot shots at it while it's unable to lock onto any of them. It's during this that some of Nora's grenades miss and slam into the side of 2 or 3 buildings, one of which is housing a small buildup of bird nests. Sparks from the grenade ignite the nest, and over the course of the fight we see the building ignite and spread. This will not affect the fight beyond adding a touch of dramatic lighting, but it will come into play later. With all this running around, the Nuck does the old bring it around town and knocks all of them off their feet. It rips its mouth open and extends the spikes in its back, becoming, well, mostly more intimidating. And before you ask, no, John is not getting his big sword mode. It's stupid. This upgrade is stupid. Possibly the dumbest in the whole show. And that's saying something when the main character mains a freaking gardening implement. Speaking of John, the Nuck actually trots over to where he's fallen and slams down at him with its front hooves. He blocks it with his shield, but between his struggling and the crater it's slowly carving with his body, he's only got a few seconds before being crushed. Nora and Ren watch from their prone positions, though Nora seems to have a plan. With a determined look on her face, she reaches into her pocket and pulls out a crystal of dust. Ren sees this and yells for her to stop, just as she stabs it into her shoulder in a flurry of electric sparks. She bursts forward to slam into the Nuck, taking it off balance enough for John to escape and for RWBY to get another strike in, enraging it further. Nora collapses to the side, clearly in pain, and her body twitches from the dust inside of her. Considering we've seen her hit with electricity up to this point, we can ascertain injecting dust right into her body may be more potent but also more painful and dangerous. Back with the Nuck, it turns towards RWBY only to see a larger black cloud a couple of blocks away, which we should be able to guess is Crow. A quick cutaway to him shivering and groaning from the position will confirm this for us, so when we jump back to the Nuck, we can see it's losing interest in Ranger over the misery it can see elsewhere. Picking up on this, Ren climbs the tree in the courtyard and fires at it, distracting it. It pins him to the wall and it's about to finish him off with its other hand when Nora, in her weakened state, calls for RWBY to launch her. She launches, blocks the blow with her hammer, her and Ren get a cute moment together, and Nora becomes less like Thor and more like Loki when the Nuck slams her back and forth. And for all those of you wondering, the reason why the Nuck pauses while Ren and Nora have their moment is that it's still debating whether to kill them or go for that tasty Kentucky Fried Crow just around the corner instead, and its indecisive head movements will give that away. Anyway, being tossed like a ragdoll finally breaks Nora's aura and she's left seemingly comatose. Ren breaks free, but ultimately gets his teeth kicked in, loses his pistols, and his aura broken. When the Nuck charges at them and Nora sees Ren is about to charge it right back, unarmed, she tackles him under a building while John and Ruby distract the Nuck. Nora literally and figuratively slaps some sense into the incensed Ren, explaining that they can do this, but they can't just be reckless about it. When she says that, she spasms a little, and after Pain of the Dust, at least we can figure that from the way she holds her arm. She says she won't let him kill himself like this, that after everything they've been through, she won't let it end. He pulls out his father's blade and she wraps his fingers around the hilt. They nod to each other and crawl out from under the building. The rest of the fight plays out like in the canon show, with some good teamwork to immobilize its arms and body, then Ren finishing it off with his melodramatic little speech. A little corny, but it conveys what it needs to and allows Ren to digest what he needs to. And while that might feel a little underwhelming for what is essentially the creature that murdered his parents, well, with the changes we've made, he's not really gone after the one that's really responsible. Now has he? Ren collapses, Nora hugs him, Ruby runs off to tend the crow and has a nice moment where he congratulates them on killing the Nuck. This is when the airship arrives, having seen the smoke from the buildings that caught fire all the way over in Sakura-so. They get picked up, and a throwaway line from John asks them to take them straight to Mistral, as Crow gets his wounds tended to by one of the medics. Ruby gets to tell Crow they made it, Nora and Ren have their quiet moment together to hold hands, and we get our first look at Mistral and Haven as we pull up to them on the horizon. We cut to the house where Ranger is set up, with Crow resting and Ruby begins writing her letter to Yang, which is unchanged from the original because, well, like Pyrrha's speech about criminal fights in V3, everything applies. While Ruby speaks, we get the shot of Weiss paying off Pilot Boy to take her to Mistral, which is untouched. At the Belladonna house, we get Blake opening a chest with the Albion name emblazoned on it, and she pulls out the tattered White Fang flag. We cut to Yang and Neo aboard a boat, leaning against a wall and being all cool and stuff. Yang's looking at the Team Stark picture while Neo studies the map. At Beacon, we find it's been mostly secured, with all but the tower being fretted over by rescue workers. The tower itself has been sectioned off, and as the black ichor drops from the Weavern, whatever emerges is quickly gunned down by Coco and a small cadre of other huntsmen, who are languidly sitting around the barricade. Behind her, Velvet looks down at her scroll where she and Coffee have been accepted into Shade Academy. With Nora, Ren, and John, the three sit together in one of the Mistral House's rooms, alone, quietly decompressing with each other. We go back to Weiss on the airship, looking out a window and a mirror to her exit in Season 3. Then we jump back to Blake, who is watching a micro-hologram of Adam's speech. Sighing at it, she turns it off and looks to Sun, smiling a bit to see him there. With Yang and Neo, they arrive at Himawari's docks, driving up past the train station being repaired. We hop back to Velvet and Cardin as they meet at the docks and say goodbyes to each other. Cardin says that he's found a job in Mistral for him and his team, so they'll be heading there. They wish each other luck and promise to stay in touch, then share a tender hug before pulling away. There's some lingering there, but as much as I'd love to push the Holy Bun ship, turning Cardin into a good kid and one of Coffee's friends is already a pretty sharp deviation from canon as is. From there we visit Adam, settling into his throne in new, cool digs as designed by the Sketchy Huntsmen, not that scrub uniform he's worn from Volume 4 onward. Ruby finishes penning her letter and sets it down before going over to her uncle, who comments that he guesses that she was the one that saved him this time around. Ruby rounds out her monologue to Yang as Yang and Neo hit the fork in the road where the sign has been scrawled out to say bandits, and Neo praises the map. They share a look, a smile, and a nod, and the two take off into the middle distance. With Ruby's last words about things finally going their way, we get a pan over of Leo Lionheart's office, and we get our first ever shot of Watson this entire series, with his mention of Salem being our first and only indicator that this meeting with Leo should be concerning. The rising strings cut us to black, and we hit the credits. With the credits over, we get an after-credits scene with Crow nursing a drink in a Mistralian bar. A shadowed figure approaches behind him and he turns to meet them. His eyes narrow and immediately his hand is on Harbinger, drawing it out and pressing it to the man's throat. We get a close-up shot of a sinister smile and the man says, "Well, now that's a welcome. I'm supposed to ask you for my cane." Crow squints at the man, and then draws back, stashing Harbinger and pulling out Osmond's cane. He tosses it to the man, commenting, "It's good to see you, Oz, but you got a sick sense of humor." The man catches it, saying, "Oh, you don't know the half of it." The shadows peel back, revealing the very much alive Roman Torchwick. New outfit and all. Cut to black, volume done. I'd genuinely like to know how many people saw that one coming. I've had that in the works for 3 goddamned years, and I've only spoken a peep about it to like 5 people. Do you know how long I've kept that in my back pocket? I needed to make sure that RWBY did nothing of substance with Oscar before deciding to make the switch, and Volume 7 confirmed it for me that Oscar was just an excuse to have a blank slate fill Ozpin's shoes. Replacing his scenes with moments from Roman's past felt like a fitting change, and one that not only foreshadowed his return, but also his character development going forward. It really surprised me that not enough people noted how succinct my summary of Roman was at the end of Volume 3. Kinda skimmed over him just because I wanted this entire moment to come. So yes, welcome back Roman Torchwick to the cast. An interesting element that's going to no doubt be a blast to play with and an utter pain as well. Same goes for Neo, who is now Yang's journey buddy, because everybody gets one, except Weiss. All she's really getting is Pilot Boy, but that's all she really needs, am I right? Actually, concerning Weiss and Team Ranger, I've not really changed much of anything regarding them this volume. I've simply spaced out their stories a little bit more, modified a few key moments so characters can breathe, and offered a little more explanation for the actions they took, as well as set up a major plot point in the next volume, though I wonder if anyone can guess what that is. And no, it doesn't involve Roman. Yang was a tougher nut to crack, since the canon volume already handled her surprisingly well. It was a rare instance where I was hesitant to change things because of their already present quality, but needed to in order to fill the proper time slot. So why not throw Neo into the mix, explain her own survival from the events of Volume 3, and give her more to work with herself as a character while using her as a foil to Yang? Well, maybe canon Neo isn't quite as soft as I've made her out to be here. We don't actually know all that much about her other than her combat prowess and the fact she's almost literally a tool for whoever's in charge. So in that way I felt justified in the modification. Blake was easily the hardest character to get right, and as you can tell I've basically delivered myself a clean slate for Volume 5 now that I've compacted the bulk sum of it into Blake's plot in Volume 4. Ilia, meanwhile, in this volume serves as both an extension of and foil to Adam. Someone who's walking down almost the same road but hasn't quite crossed the point of no return. Someone who has a chance to redeem herself in the eyes of the audience and the world. Blake, meanwhile, gets a more conflicted character arc, wherein she wrestles with her own reasons for leaving and what exactly she wants to do, and Sun serves as that little bit of light to help guide her towards an answer. Not his answers, mind you, but her own. And while I didn't have Blake arriving at her own answer quite yet, it's clear that she's decided that she needs to do something, because being part of the Guard isn't all she can be doing for the world when Adam is leading a coup in the White Fang. Speaking of Adam, he got his own little character arc this time around, a replacement for that honestly pointless villain cutaway we had in Volume 4. Those accomplished nothing other than to shove Cortana in our faces and prove that Cinder is best when she doesn't open her mouth. But yes, Adam and Sienna are given more screen time to develop the internal politics of the White Fang and the differences in ideology that led to Adam assassinating her. What we see here, and at the beginning of Volume 5, is going to be Adam at his apex, at his most threatening, and I'm excited to see how the hill begins to tip down the farther he goes. Special thanks to Romulus Numa and Spring Dragonfly for contributing to the adding flavor to Remnant spreadsheet, allowing me to pull out Tonfuism and faunalist superiority out for pseudo-religious nods. Yes, I do use that sheet from time to time. It's rare, but it comes in handy when I really need that extra oomph. Consider adding to it yourself. Moderately Entertained Zero has kept it up and running, and he did such a good job of setting it up. It's always a lot of fun to see how other people interpret the setting and how they want to add to it. For example, I preach to you my new religion, the followers of the fluffy ears, and I encourage you all to join, or else I disown you. And that, my friends, is Volume 4. I still feel to some degree Volumes 2 and 3 are the apexes of my work on the series thus far, but Volume 4 only needed some retooling as opposed to complete overhauls, so I guess that's to be expected. I wasn't doing much of the heavy lifting here, except for the timeline. Holy shit, that goddamn timeline. Official dates, or at least approximate time zones, guys. It comes in so goddamn handy. If you feel like there's something that I've missed, there's something you don't feel works, or you just want to show general support, please let me know in the comments below. The most pressing questions and issues raised will be addressed in the follow-up streams about a week or two after I finish uploading the series, so I hope to see you all there. Of course, this project would be nowhere near as awesome without the tireless work of the Sketchy Huntsmen. Last year we had only around 12 artists that did a total of 19 images. This year, we had somewhere around 30 artists who did somewhere in the vicinity of 180 images. Holy crap! It's because of their hard work and effort this project came out so spectacularly, and I hope that the team can keep growing and growing as the series goes on. There are some big ideas being thrown around about Volume 5, and I am excited to see how many of them we can pull off. Now keep in mind, I couldn't do this all without my lovely patrons, each of which have supported me through thick and thin. Remember that for $1 or more to my Patreon, you get access to the Team Frostbite Discord server where FamtanFalling, Dashy Lee, and myself are regular participants, as well as other fan favorites like Mediocrity, the Floof Artist, and the rare but enjoyable British Ninja. Otherwise, if you want to support the channel but don't want to pay a dime, you can subscribe, click that bell, and make sure you have notifications active. This will let you see all of my content when it pops up on the channel. If you're still not receiving updates, because honestly, YouTube's algorithm has only gotten worse these days, feel free to follow me on Twitter, at Raymond_McNeil, where I regularly update about what's come out most recently and what I'm working on next. Thank you all so much for watching, I hope to see you all in my next video. Until then, catch you all on the flip side.